Um, Thank you very much, Professor Parnavitana.
Some of you already know Professor K.D. Parnavitana, but for those of you who don't know, Professor Parnavitana graduated from the University of Ceylon, Peruvian. He then specialized in the Dutch language of the 17th and 18th centuries and was awarded a doctorate from the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. His PhD thesis was on the archives of the Dutch East India Company administration in Ceylon. He served the National Archives since 1970 in various positions, including as Deputy Director and Acting Director. He also contributed to the Rajarata University of Sri Lanka in various capacities, including the head of department and professor of humanities. He was bestowed the degree of D.Litt honoris causa from the Rajarata University in recognition of his national and international literary and intellectual contributions. He has numerous publications, too many to mention here. He has published many books and articles on the Dutch presence in Sri Lanka. He has won national and international awards. The best contribution to national heritage, Uruma Prasada Pranama, once in a lifetime state award by the Ministry of Cultural Affairs and National Heritage, and also the best translation at the State Literary Awards ceremony. Her Majesty Queen Beatrix of the Kingdom of the Netherlands decorated Professor Parnavitana with the title Knight of the Order of Orange Nassau in 2002 on the occasion of 400 years of Netherlands-Sri Lanka bilateral relations. Professor Parnavitana, the Sri Lanka Literary Society thanks you for accepting our invitation to give this lecture, and we look forward to hearing about Galle, the heritage city.
All participants are welcome to my presentation today entitled Galle Fort, the heritage city. All of you know about Galle, and it is located in the south coast, and it is the capital city of the southern province. It is a man-made city, not a city that you can compare with the ancient cities in Anuradhapura, Polonnaruwa. This is a peculiar structure with military architecture that was prevailed during the Dutch and the Portuguese and the Dutch periods. This present fort is almost a Dutch creation, but there was a fort before constructed on the rock promontory jutting out to the Indian Ocean. It was a flat rocky surface, and where it was, Portuguese thought that it is the most suitable place to construct a fort. So they constructed the fort. They didn't have to fear about any enemy from the seaside, as there was no other nation possessed the sea power at the time. So therefore, the Portuguese constructed only the facade wall. And before I go on explaining the slides, I have to perform a small rite that thanking to the Sri Lanka Literary Society, Dr. Mahendra Gonsal Korala and Shehandi Silva, my long-standing friend, and they have invited me some time ago to make a presentation before the society. I accepted the invitation, thinking that it is a privilege for me to share my knowledge with those who are interested on the subject. So therefore, this presentation contains 3 sections. One is the preamble. Preamble means the history of the city and how the nomenclature came into use. And I wish to take you, secondly, I wish to take you around the most important places in the port city. Thirdly, my conclusion. So these are the main parts of my presentation today. As far as the history is concerned, the headland of the gold before fortifications were constructed would have been a romantic, picturesque landscape overlooking Rumasala Hills, what we call now Rumasala Kanda. Natural circular bay lying on the south coast of Sri Lanka. The memory of gold goes back to the days of Ramayana with the tradition which moves from Ramayana to Chronicle Mahavansa, the great chronicle of Sri Lanka, having no mention about gold until the reign of King Parakramabahu the Great, who reigned between 1153 to 186. However, the estuary of gold, estuary of Ginganga, you may have heard of these days, it's overflowing. Ginganga, estuary is Gintota, refers to Gimmatitta. That is the first time Mahavansa gives about even a closest place name to gold. Then the Chulavansa refers to is Galha Ganga. Ginganga, Galha Ganga in Chulavansa, which is the boundary of the southern province of Sri Lanka. Now I will draw my attention to derivation of the place name Gaul. The Portuguese and other subsequent Europeans called this place Point de Gaul in the French fashion, especially in the naval charts and maps. This was a popular form used during the early British administration. There is a multiplicity of this usage, including Punto Gale, Punto di Gale, Pinto Gal, and Pontugal. So these variations are usually found in the maps and charts of the contemporary scene. Thus, the location of the promontory has a meaningful application. The original form appears to have been Gal, and the European pronounces Gol in the same manner as those of Tangol, Tangalla, Tangol, Kagalla, Kagol, and so on. The area south of the city of Gol, presently known as Magal, considered to be the derivative of Mahagala or large rock. The north of Magala is Pettigala, and it was up until recent times, it was place name called Pettigalavatta. Legend states that there was a large rock in that area in the shape of box, and that was crushed for construction of roads. When proceed towards the north, there is another huge rock called Tuakugala, now presently called Tuakugala or Gun Rock, and the temple is also, Buddhist temple is also situated called Tuakkugalavatta Pansala. Further north in the Havelock place, there is another rock, and the southern suburban areas called Galvadugoda. Suburban area is called Galvadugoda, where the guild of ancient native stone carvers resided. When all these factors are taken into consideration, the etymology of the word Gal, attributed to Sinhala name Gal or rocky place, The charming old fort beautified the city of Galle, which is located approximately 112 kilometers or 72 miles to the south of the capital city of Colombo. In this presentation, the attention will be focused to the area of modern Galle Fort, and icon of national heritage of Sri Lanka. Portuguese captain Don Lourenço de Almeida, while chasing a Moorish fleet in the Indian Ocean, was driven by the winds and waves to Galle on 15th November 1505. The legend has that he approached Galle after listening to a sound of rooster. Lourenço, having heard the king of the island was not in Corte, not in Galle, but in Corte. So he sailed heading towards Colombo. So therefore, this legend is also depicted in the coat of arms of Galle. On its top depicts a rooster standing on a rock. The Latin word for rooster is Gallus, and Sinhala for the rock Galle. The story of Lourenço de Almeida and the Galle combination undoubtedly caught the eyes of the Dutch artist who had designed the coat of arms of Galle, which we'll further discuss in the course of this presentation. Galle's glory had been touched by many writers. Some suggest that it is the Tarshish of Bible, where the King Solomon obtained ivory, apes, and peacocks. Based on this view, former British civil servant Emerson Tennant thought that Galle was by far the most venerable emporium of foreign trade existing in the universe. He even went in to presume that Galle was Kala, a port of call for Arabian seafarers to the east, lying between Persia and China. Arabian traveler Ibn Battuta visited Galle in 1344, stated that he reached Kuali, which is Galle, on his way to Devinur, on his way from Devinur to Colombo. The trilingual inscription, which was found in Galle, in the Galle city vicinity. Sri Lanka played an important role, being the center of the sea route between Arabia and China. The strategic location of Galle, with its natural harbor, gave a prominence above all other ports in the island. Trilingual inscription, Chinese, Arabic, and Tamil, was discovered in 1911, fixed onto a culvert along Cliff Road in modern Minuangoda Rail, somewhere close to Minuangoda Rail Gate, by English engineer F.H. Tomlin. This is a significant piece of evidence to the antiquity of Galle. Chinese Admiral Cheng He first landed in Galle with the intention of taking away the sacred tooth relic, which was at Corte, the then capital of Sri Lanka. This inscription must have been placed on his second visit to Sri Lanka in 1411. One could see this tablet in the National Museum in Colombo. This is written in 3 languages, which were considered to be the lingua franca at the time. Now we look into the situation prior to the advent of Portuguese. The opulence of Galle and beauty of maidens have been recorded even prior to arrival of Portuguese, mainly in Sinhala literary works. The late 14th century Sinhala messenger poem Tisar Sandesha has an aerial route of its messenger via Galle. The messengers of Mayura Sandesha belongs to the second decade of the same century, runs via Gaul. All these poets use the place name Galla as it's being used today. Accordingly, the place name Galla has a considerable antiquity, not an introduction of Portuguese. Now the slide you see is the situation at the advent of the Europeans. This is not drawn to a scale and drawn by a Portuguese officer who was serving in Goa named Barreto Resende, Pedro Barreto Resende. This is Resende, how Resende saw the situation in gold at the time. The Portuguese who discovered gold accidentally built a fortification, protect themselves against the land enemy. Nevertheless, they had an adequate naval power to protect the fort from the seaside. Now you can see in the slide, the fortification is limited to the facade and not the other side. This rockiness and lot of buildings within the picture. This map is just a sample of Portuguese maps of Goa produced by the Portuguese officer Pedro Barreto Resende, probably in 1635 and published in 1646. The map is pictorial representation of Goa and the harbour, presumably not drawn to scale. The city is elongated and the bay is curved unnaturally. The number of rock boulders around the bay, colored in black, perhaps to catch the eyes of skippers. Rock promontory is protected on the north by the defense wall, which is strengthened by 3 bastions-like security points. The map gives the impression that the fortaleza was fully occupied with diverse buildings. The fish market shown just outside. The fish market is shown just outside. Now this is the fish market. Even nowadays, you can see this is existing in the modern form. It was continuously shown in the Portuguese maps as well as in the Dutch map. Now you see how Gale is written in this map. This is Gale. Gale is in a different way. This is how they pronounce at the time. Now I move on to a Dutch map, which is far more improved than the Portuguese map. It's drawn to some scale, and the legend says the different place names in detail here. Execute sheet. Plan of vesting is the fortification goal. Plan of the fortification goal. Now you see the difference between the Portuguese map and the Dutch map. Dutch have improved their technology in map making, and this is something closer to a modern map. There may be some differences, but still it is more accurate to be seen, and also here it is shown the suburban areas. Now the town has expanded up to this area, and it shows that along with the port area, there's an adjacent land area belongs to Goa. Now I move on to another important map drawn at the beginning of this is not. Oh yeah, this is more accurate, but it is outline is drawn very well. What you see here, the map that I skipped here is drawn in 1796, around 1796 by gold, which is done at the time of surrender to the British, a set of ready-made buildings to occupy their administrative and legal center for the southern province. Government institutions, including the customs, post, telecommunication, forest department, police, and the courts, have taken prominent place in the port. In this atmosphere, European visitor to gold. As I mentioned earlier, the same name, gold. Sir Emerson Tennant made an eloquent statement in his work Ceylon, Volume 2, published in 1859. The statement, however, was made in 1845, published 14 years afterwards, before publication of his book, Gold. Before publication of his work on Ceylon. I quote from him, "No traveler fresh from Europe will ever part with the impression left by his first gaze upon tropical scenery, as it is displayed in the bay and the wooded hills that encircle it. Although gold surpassed both grandeur and beauty by places afterward seen in the island, still the feeling of admiration and the wonder called forth by the loveliness remains vivid and unimpaired." Close quotation. Now, this is how the writers describe gold's fascinating situation, and modern age we can see the place, how it is populated and how it looks like from an aerial view. The ancient port city of Gold, the fourth largest city in Sri Lanka with the population of approximately 100,000 inhabitants by the turn of the 20th century. It is the main city and provincial capital of the southern province. Gold plays a significant role in the administrative functions in the southern province. Today, the town spreads its boundaries over the hinterland, as I show you in the previous map. The Gold Port has an extent of area 35 hectares or 90 acres land. It occupies a small port in the area of the city of Gold. When you compare to the city of Gold, it's a small area. It is one of the few still inhabited fortifications of the Dutch colonial times in the South Asian region, and was therefore in the UNESCO World Heritage List, therefore listed in the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1988 as a living monument. We'll see the registration. This is taken from World Heritage website of UNESCO. Justification how it was taken into consideration as a World Heritage Site. Now we are moving on to the archway to enter the old port. Coat of arms, you see there, this was fixed onto the front by the front front facade by the Dutch, and it was removed by the British and fixed onto the interior wall inside, and now it is fixed onto that wall there. You can see when you go to Galle. The coat of arms of Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, VOC, or the United Dutch East India Company. This deeply etched granite slab carries several symbols of interest to Galle. On top of it depicted, as I mentioned earlier, a rooster standing on a rock, giving credence to the legend connected with the discovery of gold by adventurers from Europe. The rooster's image has become one of the widely used symbols in Galle. Below it is the shell mark that indicates trade. As far as the VOC is concerned, the crown mounted on the VOC monogram engraved on large letter V, where the letters OC on both wings on either side are superimposed, protected by two lion guardant standing on either side. The bottom text is the plate gabled by two columns both sides with the inscription Anno 1669, indicating the date on which the gate was completed. This is the place where the earlier plaque was fixed, and VOC plaque was fixed, and it was removed and taken back to the interior. And here you see the British coat of arms fixed when they came into power, British Royal Arms. Keys to Galle Fort was handed over to the British on 23rd February 1796 in a very formal manner to the administrator in Galle, Lachlan Macquarie of the 77th Regiment of the British Army. Somewhat later, the British authorities made arrangements to fix royal arms, the lion and the unicorn on the outer archway entrance, shifting the VOC monogram over to the inner arch. So this is a close-up of that British monogram, British Royal Arms. This plaque depicting British Royal Arms fixed here is made of twice fired clay manufactured by Coates and Sealy Company in London in 1813. My attention was drawn to this inscription just above the bottom of the bottom frame was drawn by the freelance researcher Mr. Don Stadner, who visited Galle from United States. Now that inscription is somewhere here. Manufacturer of here. It cannot be seen to the naked eye. Don had a kind of very sharp camera where it was recorded. Coates and Sealy Company, London, manufactured by. It's a kind of twice fired clay, and similar plaque is there in. And this is the enlargement of Coates and Sealy here and Company, London, and the date is very difficult to read. Similar plaque was also to be seen in Trincomalee Fort Frederick's entrance, over the entrance. It should have been manufactured by the same company and imported to fix there contemporary or somewhat later. This is the place where the inner archway of entrance to the fort, and you see the VOC monogram is there, and these are the two photographers have seen in 2 centuries. This first one by Henry W. Cave in 1900. And this is in 2004 by Bertie Gunasekara, who was taken photographs for my book on gold. You can see the difference between the 2 centuries, the clothing and the way men behave and community and all that kind of things can be self-narrated by these photographs. Now we move on to the most important building in the port, the warehouse. The Dutch gave an unmatching character to gold by not duplicating the plan of fortification of gold anywhere in the island. The unique character of this movement is that one should better seen than a description. It has its own inherent quality of not responding to modern influences. The drawing you see is taken from Governor Isaac Augustine Rum's diary. It contains several drawings of the port. The warehouse here serves dual purpose. One is, it is a part of the rampart. The second is the double-storied warehouse or pack house with high roof. It is in a way part of rampart. On the other hand, it serves as a warehouse for VOC collections. This was taken from, as I said, Isaac Augustine Rum's Governor's Diary, translation of the Governor's Diary, which was published in 2016. This building is functioning as the Maritime Archaeology Museum at present. This is dated 1720, circa 1720. This is the present situation after conservation. This is now being used as Maritime Museum. This is another interesting place, another rocky area where former gold police station or superintendent of police whose office was there. This is the grim old Portuguese battery called Black Fort. It is normally called Black Fort. Even during the Dutch times, recorded Black Fort, named after blackened by the Portuguese smiths who had their smithy here. This oldest stronghold constructed with entirely local material, coral stones and lime. Close look at the wall of the Black Fort would observe 7 varieties of limestones brought by hosts to construct the bastion like an artistic line drawing designed for us by nature. Now we move on to Dutch Reformed Church. After restoration. This is also a building with fascinating history. The Dutch Reformed Church is the building opposite Gold Library. It's a part of the warehouse bearing the date 1672. The belfry belonged to that church, bears the date 1701, erected almost 50 years before construction of the present church. The church is constructed on a foundation of the shape of a cross, which is called in Dutch Kruiskerk, cross church. The wife of the Dutch commander who was serving in Gold, whose name was Casparus the Young, who gave birth to a child, couple being for many years childless, constructed this church with overwhelming joy at their personal cost to baptize the newly born child. Archives of the Dutch Reformed Church records that she was baptized in this church on 24th August 1755. I think the church took about 3 years to construct. In the church, you can see large number of tombstones of various important officers. The tombstones are laying on the floor of the church, formerly taken from the Karakop or the cemetery, which was outside the fort, place where present police barracks are there on the Bakwella Road. As a child, I can remember there was an inscription at the entrance to that cemetery of church cemetery, Memento Mori. It is a Latin term, which I later has not seen what has happened to it. So it is built upon with the police Southern Province headquarters now, that cemetery. Now we can move on to this is a sample of tombstone, and this is the heraldry or the family coat of arms with 2 cherubs on either side, and this is Dutch inscription that this is the coat of arms of the family. Here, Rust, then Edelen, Estringen, Heer, Adrianus, and so on. It goes on. Very, very difficult to read unless you have a training in the 18th century, 19th century Dutch language. This is a typical narrow street in Gold Fort. The Dutch designed the present narrow network of streets in the fort and planted alongside a line of surya trees to diffuse shade. Their broad leaves impart coolness and gave the street to the fresh and enlivening atmosphere to feel as one walking in his own garden. The most of the existing Dutch houses in the fort have been built during the second half of the 18th century. They could be easily identified with the spacious veranda rested originally on the wooden shaft and later replaced with columns plastered and whitewash. This part of the house called stoop in the Dutch or in Sinhala what we call istopur. The front area with columns is called stopur. Stopur is derived from the Dutch word stoop. This house units in the fort are built on narrow plots of land perpendicular to the street line, so each house gets share of it, having the frontage to the street which many believe to have commercial value. This is another important building, Commandeur's residence. Commandeur, I use the word commandeur, not the English meaning commander. Commandeur had civil and military functions, who was the chief administrator of the province, and he made this house as his residence, and it has a fascinating history. Commandeur's residence then transferred to the British, converted to the King's House, which later changed hands to the commercial establishments, including Clark's, Spence and Company, and Walker and Sons later. The British governor, William Gregory, 1872 to 1877, sold this house to Clark Spence and Company in 1873 for 1,500 sterling pounds in order to raise funds to build the Queen's Cottage, Norelia. He was punished for not obtaining the necessary approval from the Secretary of State for his transaction. Next to this building, which I don't have a picture, is the Anglican Church, which is in the fort, constructed on 21st February 1871. This magnificent church was designed by famous British architect James D. Smither, the author of splendid designs of his old area, Gold Officer. He was the designer of Old Town Hall in Petta and the Victoria Memorial Eye Hospital in Colombo, and also the National Museum was drawn by this architect. He was the government architect at the time. Now we move on to another important bastion, Moon Bastion, Clock Tower and Cat. There are 12 bastions in the fort. Out of the most prominent, Sun, Moon, and the Star bastions. The Moon is the strongest bastion with the width of 400 feet on the ground level, and has upper lookout called Cat. The extraordinary feature of this bastion is this unusual structure. The exact purpose of this unusual structure is not clear, but presumably a dungeon with an entrance from rampart side. Bastion in the east is called Sun Bastion. So this is Moon Bastion. The dungeon is there in Star Bastion. Sun Bastion is on the port side, extreme end of the port. Now we move on to the esplanade. I have shown you a map depicting the esplanade taken from the Survey Department of Colombo, which I shown you earlier. The old defaced map. The area was reserved for esplanade, and later British planters and entrepreneurs get together and made use of esplanade for horse racing. Now, what they call the esplanade is here means that it was the turf prepared for horse racing, similarly as Goldface Green in Colombo. Goldface Green was also originally a horse racing place until it was shifted to Turf Club in new building in Racecourse, Colombo 7 in 1852. English planters engaged in coffee and later tea planting in remote areas of the Gold District, including Morocco and Iniduma, in the mid-19th century. They established an organization in 1885 called Gymkhana Club. The word Gymkhana was very popular in the British colonies as the newly invented substitute for the term record court. It applied to a place of public resort where necessary facilities for athletes and games were provided. Now, what you see in the picture is a very, very rare picture. At the time, the esplanade was converted to a horse racing. Horse racing pavilion is here, and the crowd and the horse racing tracks are here. And this is a very rare picture. That was the second stage, and third stage was it became converted to international cricket ground. The first international cricket encounter took place in this ground on 23rd October 1882 with an English team. On the 9th March 1998, World International Cricket was inaugurated. Cricket ground was inaugurated as the 57th international cricket ground in the world. Now, very rare picture you will see now again. This is also the international cricket ground. This is the disaster tsunami on 26 December 2004. However, the ramparts and the fort walls all were intact. Even tsunami could not fell down. Now you see the bus is sinking in the seawater in this esplanade. All these were reconstructed or restored later by the government. Tsunami scene follows the oldest hotel in port. This was then called New Oriental Hotel, now functioning under different management under chain hotel, Hotel Amangal. Now you see another picture. This is a common scene in interior of the street house. It has a central courtyard, a lot of ventilation, which is something like Madamidula in Candian buildings, Candian houses. This kind of magnificent edifice was not constructed by one nation. It was of quadruple parentage. The gold in symbols, if you see, this is the top figure. This one is the flag of Southern Province. Not only Southern Province people, but some people from various other areas were also taken as it was constructed. This is the Portuguese coat of arms. This is the Dutch company coat of arms. This is the British Royal Arms. So all four go together, we can call it quadruple parentage, but it is a World Heritage now. That is what I want to say today under the title, under the heading, World, the Heritage City. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Parnavithana, for taking us on a historical journey in Galle.
Okay, well, Professor Parnavithana, thank you very much for giving us your time. It was really interesting to listen to. I think we could think of more questions. So what I want to ask you is, somebody suddenly remembers something he should have asked you, whether we can email you if that happens.
Yes.
So for those who have a sudden flash of memory,
you have my email address, isn't it?
You do that too, and I will publish something on YouTube.
Yeah.
Talk and some other questions. So thank you very much for your time. So, and thank you all for coming, and hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Here in Britain it's absolutely wonderfully sunny, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Shihan, thank you very much for introducing Professor Parnavithana and for conducting the interview. Thank you very much.